Well, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jamie Piers. I'm VP of Sales and Alliances over at Synatic. We are a data automation and integration tool. Our claim to fame is that we make data and integration as easy as it physically can be. So we know that that's a challenge, but it is one of the things we focus on, and we're super excited and pleased to have this session today and to be talking to you about what E&O is and how we can handle E&O inside Synatic. So what I'm going to do here is, just so that I can be on one screen, I'm going to make sure that we're all showing here. Yeah. So we are going to talk a little bit of Turkey today. I like to talk Turkey. I like to talk specifics. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Synatic can do. But primarily what we're going to do up front is we're actually going to talk about what E&O is. So a lot of people will know a lot about E&O. I don't need to go deep and delve into it. What we're going to do is we're going to run through what are errors and omissions, how do we insure against it, what are common examples of it, and then really we want to talk a little bit of Turkey today on this webinar and get into the meat of what Synatic can do. That's not to give an obvious punt for Synatic. It's really just to say, like, this is an education session about how we can turn these concepts into reality, and then we encourage people to just explore what they can do with their data. So we find a lot of the time we talk about fear of FOGs, which is fear of getting started. Fear of getting started is really what we find is a very pervasive thing when people look at the data they have. They struggle with this concept of, I need to actually do something with my data, and kicking off that process. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And that's really why we want to deal in the real today. Like, what can you actually do to make your data more efficient? One of the rules I've got whenever I'm presenting is, I talk for a day job. I talk too much. My team will tell you that. So feel free to pop comments, questions, thoughts, anything you want to do. Please put it on into the chat. Amanda and Braden, who are on our marketing team, they will be moderating, so they'll tell me if I need to stop. I like being interrupted. It lets me know that I'm not an anesthetist and I'm not putting you to sleep, that I'm actually selling stuff and doing stuff and educating you. The moment I get interaction, I love interaction. I prefer to be interrupted. I prefer to be interrupted as it's happening, because then it's a pertinent question there and then, and it's telling me that I'm hitting on pain points there. Cool. So what are errors and omissions? And really what I want to get across today is errors and omissions are these 10 guys here. And I put an obvious little meme in there, but we know that errors and omissions are these 10 things. And the stress and strain around insurance, and especially in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, as the insurance industry has grown and as the insurance amount of data flowing around the industry has grown, it's put an inordinate amount of stress on recapturing data and re-entry of data. We had a customer the other day, one of the ISU agencies, if you know the ISU group over in USA, he was saying, it's cool that you're bringing me all these insurtechs, but if I have to re-enter all of that data, I'm creating more risk. And is it really bringing me the efficiency that it's claiming to bring? And too many times that answer is no. So unless we can figure out how to de-risk this data process from these 10 little guys into moving that data to the right person at the right time, it creates a lot of struggles with this concept of integrating data and moving data, and therefore it creates errors and omissions. So I've just listed a couple of examples there. I'm not going to read through them. I'm not a big fan of reading PowerPoints. I like to get down to meat and potatoes, so we're gonna shoot through that. But really, errors and omissions comes down to these 10 guys. And what we want to do from an errors and omissions point of view is, as much as possible, take these 10 guys out of the picture and make the data happen automatically. And that's really what we want to do to avoid errors and omissions. When we go and look at the cost base of errors and omissions, all insurance agents, I would safely assume almost every single insurance agent, and I would argue that they're a little bit crazy if they don't, will have insurance against errors and omissions, and that can range significantly in cost. And obviously, the greater the GWP of the end customer, the greater the insured cost against that, because the greater the liability of messing something up. I drew a quick quote so that I didn't plagiarize here. I screenshotted it, and I'm giving this credit to Hartford, but Hartford popped this on their website. They're talking about $500 to $1,000 per employee per year. So if you're running a mid-sized shop, 50 employees, you're in for 50K per annum. Now, we can't, when we look at data automation and integration, we can't necessarily squash that cost entirely. There's still the liability exists, and the need for that insurance exists, but we can certainly focus on ways to reduce that. So let's talk about some common examples of errors and omissions, things that I'm pretty sure a whole bunch of people on this call are going to go, I've been there before. And what we're going to do is every single one of these points is going to come back to this message of it's surrounding data. It's surrounding data recapture, data re-entry. And it's, again, we're always coming back to that little thing I showed up front, these 10 little guys, we've only got 10 fingers, and they make mistakes. There's the very obvious, like we just reverse two figures around. So we change a 0 and a 1, and all of a sudden 10,000 becomes $1,000. And that's a very material effect on any coverage you're taking if you change the insured to 10,000 to $1,000. So there's also quite a lot of business process around that data, and really what we do at Synatic is we make sure that we can take these business processes and these disparate solutions and move the data between these solutions. So, there's obvious ones like not ensuring your customer has the appropriate coverage. So we have to make sure that we engage with the customer, that the customer has the correct coverage in place. And if we don't do that as an insurance agent, our liability significantly increases, because if that customer then turns around, the end insured turns around and says, well, you said I was covered, and they haven't reviewed and agreed to that coverage, we're in a place where we're liable as an insurance agent. It then tied to that is explaining the coverage. The onus is nowadays more and more entirely so almost on the agent to say, you need to know that this, and this works like this. Is it signed off? Have they really understood what they're getting covered by, and what that looks like? The biggie is administrative errors, and it all points back to these 10 little guys. Is we need, you can get an address wrong, you can get a name wrong, you can get a social security number wrong, you can get figures wrong, you can get lines of business wrong, and that really causes a lot of pain. And it both causes pain from a point of view of errors and omission, but also just pure inefficiency. And really what we can do when we focus on this errors and omission space is, and I'll get to it in the conclusion a little bit as well, is it's not just about errors and omissions. It's actually about a lot about efficiency. How do we make our business more efficient? How do we get data moving so that it's not the stagnant piece of data hidden behind the front end of whatever your AMS is. So be it Hawksoft, SIS, QQ Catalyst, AMS 360, Applied Epic, whatever it is, we don't want that data hidden behind the user interface. We want to take that data out and make it live, make it breathe, move it into our insurtechs, move it into our documentation, like Accord form creations, and ripping Accord forms, so on and so forth. Not identifying the exposure, that's often a training issue we find. So we find a lot of customers need to work with, especially their junior producers, and make sure that the junior producers understand the risk. Again, there's points where we can talk about integration there, in that we can start saying, well, how do we bring risk analysis into your workflow, say within your Salesforce or within your HubSpot or within your agency Zoom, and make sure that we've got those checkboxes and processes built in, and then we can kick off information from that and kick off workflows from there. Policy updates and communicating client data over to the carrier. Policy updates obviously going to the customer if things are coming up for renewal, or if there's a material change in the terms from the carrier, we need to communicate that to the customer, so on and so forth. So yeah, one of my favorite sayings at the moment is take the A out of AI and just be intelligent. And I use it clearly tongue in cheek. It's not meant as a put down of AI and saying AI is rubbish and it doesn't do anything. I'm not an entire naysayer. What I think is very prevalent in the industry at the moment is the need to be pragmatic about what we can achieve and how we can get there, and starting to move on this journey of data. So why I say take the A out of AI is take the artificial out. Just start doing cool stuff with your data. Be intelligent with it. You don't have to get machine learning and AI and engines that are going to do magnificent wonderworks with your data. There are 3 steps towards, or 3 phases of having our data coordinated. Is we've got our disparate phase, we've got our coordinated phase, and then we can build ML and AI. For a lot of people, that building of AI and ML, it's at the end of a journey, and it starts another journey when you get there. So we need to go from disparate data to integrated, collated data. Then we can start talking about AI and ML. If you throw disparate data at AI and ML, it just ain't going to magically wave a wand and all of a sudden work and do cool stuff. That's just not how AI and ML works. Maybe in 15, 20 years, AI and ML will progress to there. Maybe it'll be in 5 years. But where we find this buzzword of throwing AI up onto a PowerPoint is so often done in boardrooms and inapplicable or inexecutable in reality, is that there's a journey to get there. So where we encourage people to go there is, I talk about GSD with my team a lot. I talk about that a lot with our customers. So GSD is in polite company, it's get stuff done. In company where I'm a little bit more comfortable, I'll talk get expletive done. And that's really the concept of like get forward momentum. We talk a lot in Synatic about momentum over perfection. So momentum is more valuable than getting it exactly 100% right. And I'm married to a perfectionist. I know perfectionism well. My wife will tell me very often, here I've got a tea mug sitting on my desk. I've got last night's wine glass sitting on my desk. She gets super irritated with me. Almost used a wrist slap word there, but so I'm not a perfectionist. I believe fully in this concept of like, if you're on this journey, go on the journey, take steps, learn stuff, figure stuff out. Don't aim for this destination. And I believe in that in life generally. I believe that we are on a journey, and that we learn things as we move along. So get stuff done, take the artificial out of AI, and just be intelligent. Do something because you know it needs to be done and you can figure it out. Even if it's the first step in terms of getting your data sorted, the first step is more valuable than the destination, because the destination is far away. That first step, that fear of getting started, get moving forward, do something as opposed to nothing. Cool. So I will talk a little bit now about what are the sorts of things we can do with Synatic. And I want to use this as an education session. I'm going to try and keep us down to kind of about 35, 40 minutes. We all know we're all in the insurance industry. And as I've been talking a lot about these 10 little guys, so your 10 little fingers, I'm pretty damn sure have got to go and capture some data today, or do something where if we're done with the learning, we're done with the learning. So what we've done here is we built out a flow that, and I just want to drag off Salesforce quickly whilst prepping and running you through what that flow is. So what we've done here is we built out AMS 360, an AMS 360 policy, flow. And what we've allowed you to do in this case is, and this is a classic example of an E&O. So there is no reason why we can't include this in an errors and omissions type scenario. So what this flow does is it looks at policies that are sitting inside AMS 360 and says, give me all of those policies that are created inside AMS 360. Then what it does is, and that's this flow over here, this source of data over here, AMS 360 policy data. So what we're really doing is, a buffer is a store of data inside Synatic. So we fetch some data from AMS 360. We use Wasapi. If you don't know what Wasapi is from AMS 360, it's a web services API. It's a way to get data in and out of AMS 360. Just the same we could do with Hawksoft, just the same we could do with Applied Epic, etc., etc. So all the lovely brand names we can throw in there. And what we've done is we've effectively pulled this data out, and this is policy information. So you'll see I've got a whole bunch of policies here, and I can open up one of those policies. And I've literally, this is data sitting inside Synatic. So we've taken the data and we've warehoused it in Synatic. We can use that for reporting. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use that to integrate something into Salesforce. So I didn't check my Salesforce before I started this session, so I beg your forgiveness, but you'll see that there are no open cases at the moment in Salesforce. And what we're going to do is, and this is where we start talking about Synatics Mantra of get the right data to the right person at the right time. When a policy is 2 months away from renewal, in order to avoid errors and omissions, and in order to avoid a grumpy client saying, why the hell didn't you tell me my policy was up for renewal so I could shop it out, or so that I could reduce it, increase it, whatever it may be. So in order to avoid both an irate customer as well as the liability that is created through errors and omissions there, what we do is we then go and fetch this data out of AMS 360 and we put data into Salesforce. Now, it doesn't have to be Salesforce. It can just as easily be a HubSpot. So we can go and write data to HubSpot. We can go and fetch data from any API, really, any database, and we can move that data around. So in this flow, we go and say, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, we find the expiring policies, we filter for the expiring policies, we make it pretty damn obvious that this is a demo, so we go and say, pick one for demo. Then what we do is we check that the customer exists in Salesforce before we post that policy in, so that we don't get an error when we post it. We go and check, we look up to Salesforce, we check that the contact then exists. And then what we do is we map up that data so that it can write into Salesforce. So in this case, what I've done is I've done what I call test to step, and this is nice and easy to understand. There's no complexities here. So premium 17,924.85 is expiring, and this is the policy number, and we need to do something about it. So now what we're doing is we're taking this data set, we're pushing it into Salesforce, we're applying that logic to say, this producer who owns this account must go and follow up on that. So I'm going to go now, instead of testing to step, I'm going to execute that flow. And this is a real run of the data. I'm actually now running it. In reality, when we implement this at a client, we'll do what we call trigger that. So we'll go and run this flow every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour, whatever it may be. But effectively, what I'm going to do is I've completed the push of this data that I've got sitting here into Salesforce. So I'm going to go and hit refresh here on cases. And what you'll see now is I've got the ability to see that case as it's rocking up in Salesforce. And I really want to emphasize that we're not besotted with Salesforce. It does some cool stuff. There's lots of CRMs that do cool stuff. So I can do Salesforce, I can do HubSpot, I can do Agency Zoom, I can do Dynamic CRM, whatever y'all want to use, that's what we use. So we are, as one of our strategic account managers, Michael Polanco, often says, we are Switzerland. So we're neutral. We don't really care what you, well, we care, but we don't care, if you know what I mean. We will work with whatever you bring us, and we'll make a plan to work that data. So here's my case that's been created, and you can see that exact set of data, premium 17,924.85, expiring on XYZ date, and that's exactly what's sitting here. Okay. So this is where we start to, and we specifically built this as a demo flow because we didn't just want to show you like a customer integrating. Now, can we integrate a customer? Absolutely. So when we go and look at creating a customer in HubSpot, we can go and pull data out of this exact same, well, it's a different buffer this time. It's got a set of data around customers coming out of Benefit Point in this case. So I've got my Benefit Point data sitting here off of our demo Vertafore solution. And what I'm doing is I'm passing that through and I'm pushing that into HubSpot. So as opposed to me having a policy to deal with here, you'll see that I'm going and running Mark Silvestri here. And I can do exactly the same process there. I can go and create the run. I can go and execute that flow. And you'll see that I've now got Mark Silvestri sitting in HubSpot. So again, like tool agnostic, don't really care what do y'all need to do with your data to make yourself more efficient. And critically, how does this play back into the take the A out of AI, be intelligent, get stuff done that's valuable to you, and how do we start unpacking these errors and omissions that create risk in your business so that we can go and fix those and make sure that you reduce your liability. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. You have to have errors and omissions insurance, because I don't care how good anyone tells you any integration is, you have humans. Humans are fallible and we will make mistakes. We get better humans at not making mistakes. We get worse humans who make lots of mistakes. Hey, that's life. Deal with it. So we're very pragmatic about that. And then wanted to touch on a couple of other things here quickly is we can go and do things like rip OCRs. So we can actually go and rip accord forms. So this is again where we go down to errors and omissions. So we were working on the case studies on our website. I can talk about them safely. So Louisiana Workers' Compensation Commission, we're doing a very cool project with them at the moment, and it's on workers' comp. So it's Accord 130s. And we're taking the Accord 130s, we're processing, I think it's about 45,000 Accord forms per annum. I know that by and large, we're talking to agencies who probably aren't ripping data off of Accord forms at the moment, but I just wanted to use it as an example. And what we're doing is we're fetching data off of the Accord form that allows us to go and get the information out. Now, forgive me, I just need to bring up the Accord form that we're going to rip here quickly. Okay, so this is the Accord form that we're actually going to process. The critical difference with what we're doing with Synatic is we're not just turning this into an API endpoint, we're actually putting it somewhere. So we're taking that data that we can see inside that Accord form. And what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to run this process so you can see what the data looks like now. And I'm going to go and select the file. So you see that I'll select that same, oopsie, let's go to our desktop quick. And I'm going to select that same file, that WC app demo. And that is the file that I'm then going to go and test that against. So this takes about 10-15 seconds to run because obviously it needs to go through the OCR process. If you don't know what OCR is optical character recognition. So optical eyes, character recognition being it can pick up this PDF document and it's going to turn that into data. And that's exactly what we've done here. So if we go and expand that section, I can see my confidence levels. So 96.2%, 96%, 95.8%, got a little bit of a downer on confidence, and then I get unconfident there. So that can tell me how I want to process that data. But literally what it's doing is it's taking things like nature of business, which you would have seen under nature of business here. It's a little bit further down. And we can go and expand nature of business. And here is air conditioner supply, installation, and servicing. And for that matter, I can go and say, who's the prior carrier info? And this is now a data set that sits inside Synatic that we can do something with. And that, again, it all comes down to getting that right data to the right person at the right time. How do we go and do something with this data as opposed to just having it sitting in an Accord form and doing diddly squat? Now, we're doing projects with carriers at the moment where we're going and coordinating like their Duck Creek data and their Accord form data because Duck Creek doesn't have all of the data that they need off of the Accord form. So now what they need to do is they need to fetch the policy number from Duck Creek and all its data. And then they've got their Accord form data stored in a SQL database. And we're merging those two together and saying, here's your holistic view of that policy. Hopefully I'm not getting too technical. But effectively, what we can do is we can take Accord forms and turn that into Salesforce write. And then in the same way, what we can do is we can actually go and do the converse of that. So now what we can do is we can say, well, if I've got data sitting within Salesforce, I can actually go and create an Accord form. So again, this is now saying, and there are several instances where this is pertinent, and I know that quite a few of the AMSs, in fact, most of the AMSs have to a greater or lesser degree, this Accord form creator or writer. So what we do is we cover a little bit of a different ground there, and some of them do have, and some of them don't have that capability. But effectively, what I can do is I can go and run a template name, an Accord 130. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking data. Yeah, shoot.
In the chat, Dennis asked if the Accord forms PDFs.
Yes, they are PDFs. So this is a PDF form here. But Dennis, I think what you may be asking is, does Synatic only deal with fillable PDFs like this, or if I had a handwritten form? I am imagining that, okay, cool, you just said yes. So yes, we can deal with some handwriting if it's close on to hieroglyphics. then we're going to struggle a little bit. We can deal with manually filled and scanned documents. So if you got it stored in a JPEG or PNG or whatever it may be, whichever file format it may be, we can handle those and rip the data. Great, I've got a question. It means I'm not putting people to sleep. At least Dennis is awake. Yeah. So what we can then do here is we're doing the reverse around now. So instead of fetching data from an Accord form and pushing that into Salesforce, we're fetching data from Salesforce and pushing that into an Accord form. And I go through the same process here. And again, this process can be automated. It would go through trigger events in Salesforce and go and create it. In this case, I've gone and created an Accord form that's filled with data from Salesforce. So here you'll see I've got United Oil Emergency Generators, 21 Hyde Street, etc., etc. I've gone and filled in bits and bobs of the data here. And this was 100% blank before. It was a fillable PDF that we've now gone and filled so that we can send that out. So we can deal with both directions there. And naturally, we're fully aware that to a greater or lesser degree, a lot of your E&O risk comes from Accord forms, just because there's that manual process, but you want to standardize around it. Carriers want it in that format. So how do you get it into the carrier format? And how do you go and push data through there? So, I mean, really what we've done is we've covered quite a lot of ground here and spoken about how we can go and move data between solutions. This is a slightly more complicated flow, but what I really wanted to talk about here is, and this is due to the inherent challenges of the AMS 360 API, which is, look, we're very grateful they have an API. It's a publicly available API, or it's a public API, so it means anyone can get access to it. It comes with your license of AMS 360 if you're using AMS 360. We've gone and discombobulated it, and this is one of those. So if I scroll out there, you'll see there's a whole bunch of fun that we do here to go and eventually get to the end here. And literally what we do is we go and insert a customer into AMS 360. But that all being said, we're doing very cool projects now where we're going and saying, well, we want the customer to create in HubSpot and the policy shell to create in HubSpot in custom objects. And we're going tootling off and moving that data into AMS 360, but then 360 becomes the master. So if an update happens on 360, we sync that back up to HubSpot. And we find there's a lot of pain in the industry around just this space of CRM to AMS. And we find it's across the board. And so we find this gap of like, okay, it's cool, I was on Agency Zoom. As I move up market though, I want more customizability in my CRM. And agencies start going on this journey of saying, well, I need to look at a Big Brother tool, for want of a better description. I know Kat Turney's from Agency Zoom might slaughter me afterwards if I say I'm not saying any bad stuff. I think Agency Zoom has built out a great business and does great things, but we do find that agencies themselves are starting to say, well, I need to move to the bigger things there. Cool. So I have got to the end of what I was planning on saying. I'm going to give a little conclusion there, and then I'm going to thank you all for your time. If you do want to hit me with any other questions, just post it quickly now whilst I'm looking down at the questions there. But really what we want to emphasize here is we can reliably look at how do we go and reduce E&O costs or E&O insurance costs, but then also E&O efficiency costs. So we've got to remember that the ROI from sorting out things like E&O is yes, there's an ROI on the insurance side, but very often there's an ROI on just the human time spent. And that's really where we deliver value there. You gain more efficiency, and then really just kick off your journey. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't hold back. Even if you make a mistake on your first step, like I always talk about encouraging agencies to explore the data they have and do cool stuff with the data, and not go and kind of shy away in the corner because it looks like an insurmountable task. We often use the analogy of climbing Mount Everest. You don't climb Mount Everest in a day. Well, there's a couple of psychos who can climb Mount Everest in a day, but that's a different story. For the most part, 99.999% of the people who climb Mount Everest climb it in a period of time. They don't climb it in a day. So if you need us to look after your data, we'll be happy to help. Go on your journey if you've got a data provider and get going. Say again, sorry?
We've got a new question from Michael about data hygiene and missing data.
Cool. Thank you, Michael, Mr. Trillion. Good to have you on the call today. So I'll wrap up with that point then. Thanks for interrupting my wrap up. No, I'm kidding, Mike. So one of the other things we focus on and we see a lot of in the industry, and this does play into errors and omissions, absolutely, is data hygiene. So one of our customers, and the reason why Mr. Trillion has kindly mentioned it there is because we're working on a project with him on data hygiene. Mr. Trillion is a fantastic AMS 360 consultant. We work closely with him, one of our good friends from the industry. And what the customer has is the situation of effectively miscreant data or unhygienic data. And that means that they've got a lot of duplicates, a lot of policy shells that are just there and hanging around, and they don't have any downloads coming back from Ivans. They're just there because somebody went and created a shell and then it didn't get used. So what we're doing a lot of work on there is the data cleanup process and deduplication. So for the life of me, I cannot understand why AMSs haven't built a better deduplication process, because it causes such pain downstream, especially in errors and omissions. Because then I'm going, and Dennis, I'm going to use you because you asked a question gratefully, but I'm going and contacting Dennis and saying, we don't have a policy with you, Dennis, but then I'm looking at the wrong Dennis account in my AMS, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, who's the right Dennis here? And I don't know. And that's a problem because we've now got duplicates of Dennis, same SSN number, same birth date, same address, same name. Sometimes it's been entered in differently. So they spelled Dennis with, let's go, one N and two N's. But the same issue exists there. It's that data hygiene. How do we clean that data up? How do we make it right? And how do we get that data updated so that the whole organization can benefit from that? The downstream effect of unhygienic data or unclean data is far more dramatic than people give it kudos for. It messes up billing processes, invoicing processes, integration processes to Ivans. It just, the downstream effect is dramatic. So if y'all are struggling with your data hygiene, with data duplicates, we're your team for that as well. But other than that, I am going to wrap up there. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I hope you got some information out of it. You should all have our contact details if you do want to reach out. You can get me on Jamie, Jamie, at Synatic.com, or alternatively, look me up, Jamie Piers, on LinkedIn. And anytime you need help with your data and getting data to the right person at the right time, hit me up. I'll be available. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Chat soon.